Hey, sports card fans, it's John Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. I'm joined here with my very good friend Graig at MidLife Sports Cards, and we are going to go over an update, the latest update to my Vintage 100 Index. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing good. I love that I'm one of the people you reach out to on this topic because I like data like you do. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's been a little over 6 months since we did a last video. I have to admit I was a little bit slow in updating the data. We're talking 300 cards and 6 months of data, so that's 1,800 manual entries into different spreadsheets. We have a few indexes to go over. So I just like, man, I need to get started here on entering the data, and it's a perfect timing. We have Strongsville coming up. When this video hits, it'll be later this week. So I thought it'd be perfect timing to go over some of the data for some of these card prices, see if there's any trends that we can spot, and just a general outlook on vintage cards. So just to give, for those of you who are not familiar with the Vintage 100 Index, maybe 3 years ago, I put this index together, and it's 100 vintage cards from 1948 Bowman all the way up to the 1980 Topps Ricky Henderson cards. So there's 100 cards, primarily Hall of Fame rookie cards. And I've been charting the data going back to 2019, so pre-COVID. And then we see the COVID bubble, and then continuing the data. And then about a year ago, I said, hey, why not make things even more difficult for me? And I created 3 more indexes because we used to go over within the 100 card index. There are cards from the 40s and 50s, then 60s and 70s. But once you break down 100 cards into like smaller groups of, say, 30 cards, it's not a big enough sample size, I thought. So I created another index of 100 cards called the Golden Age Index, which includes more cards from the 40s and 50s, then a separate 1960s index, and then finally a 1970s index. And what's nice about having all those cards, 300 cards that I'm tracking, is that we can pull out different players and have their own little indexes. So when we're done with the main indexes, last time you were on, we looked at the indexes for the playing days runs for Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron, 3 prominent players that are collected in the vintage era, and see what their cards are doing. So with that, are you ready to get into the analysis?
I'm ready. Let's take a look.
All right. All right. So the other thing I want to point out is when we say that this report here is as of January 2025, that means it's data through December 31st, 2024. So whenever we mention a month, it's data up to the beginning of that month. So the end of the previous month. And so let's start off with the index. The last time we did an update was July of 2024, meaning data through June of 2024. And the index was 1,142.89. Now, what does that mean? It means that on average, the average price for the card in that index was $1,142.89. And the reason why I have revised on that number is that I go off of VCP data. And depending on when I pull the data, sometimes their database takes a little bit longer to fully update. And when I go back in time and look, they added another sale at the end of the previous month. And so I update the current price. And so that changes the index a little bit. So I always mark that it's revised. So for January 2025, 6 months later, now the index is at 1,069.46, down about 6.5% or $73 for the average card price. And looking back a year ago, so where prices were at the end of December of 2023, which is the January 2024, we were at 1,071.68. So pretty much over a 12-month period, this index of 100 cards, essentially the average price didn't change. So what did you see interesting about those numbers there?
Well, I think for me the January to January number is a little bit more important because the other number has some seasonality to it, and historically speaking, cards in November, December, things slow down a little bit because people are spending money on other stuff that time of the year,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so it doesn't shock me a lot that from middle of the year to the end of the year things would be a little bit down. Now, sometimes the month before the national is a little bit soft too,
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, but the July 2024 is really through June. Doesn't
Hmm.
really include July, where there's some of that dip for that month leading up to it. So I'm not super surprised. I think what I take away from this data is really things are kind of flat right now,
Hmm.
because the year over year number means more to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's look at the actual chart going back to 2019, and the red lines just mark the years, and the dashed line there is anything to the right of that is the new data that I entered here. So, yeah, if you can, anything in particular now that we're looking back, pretty much 6 years worth of data. Anything that uh, speaks to you or that you see from just the graph here?
Yeah, I mean, the pre-COVID data, the during COVID data is interesting, but you almost have to throw it out because it's we're in a whole new world. It's like comparing the airport security before 9/11 and after. It's just a
Yep.
completely different world now. So I
Yeah.
think the marker is really probably January 1st, 2022 to now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that trend line is a slight downward trend, but it's nothing really it's some of that might be economical, but mostly flat-ish over since the COVID bubble burst.
Yeah. It's almost like and I talked about this back in that COVID period when when I was first doing the index, and it's like, okay, well, where's the new norm going to settle?
Yeah.
We had pre-COVID, we had the COVID bubble. There was pullback from those outrageously high prices. But where was the new norm going to land? And I think now that we have a little bit more data, of course, we can see a little bit more trend. And I think we've sort of hit that range of the new normal, and we'll see where things go from there, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Now, before I get to a couple things that's something that I pointed out with this data, I do want to make a note in the description of this video. I'll have a link to a spreadsheet that has different tabs for the different indexes, and you can see which cards make up each index. Because actually, the cards that are in the index are important because you get some that, as we'll see later on, may have more or less of an impact. Generally speaking, the cards that I have in the indexes are based on a PSA grade and the sales of that PSA grade in the decade grade. So if it's a card from the 50s, I track the PSA 5 price of that card. If it's in the 70s, it's a PSA 7 copy of that card. The only exception, and it's not in the vintage 100 index, but in the golden age, is the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. Knowing that a PSA 5 copy of that card would dramatically impact, even though it's one of 100, just it would throw everything off. And basically, it would just be essentially a tracking of that one card. Um, I used a PSA 1 value. So to lessen the impact of that card, but that card is included in that index. So here's what I noticed from the data, and it's something that you brought up right in the beginning of this analysis, this discussion here. If you look at the last maybe 5 months, 4 or 5 months of the last 4 years, you'll see a dip in the index. Now, at the very, very end, at say between November and December, in some 2 of the 4 years, there's a slight uptick, and the 2 recent years, there's a slight downtick in that last couple months of the year. But generally speaking, that sort of third quarter, maybe end of summer into the fourth quarter of the year, the last 4 years saw a dip in the index, which I thought was interesting that it's been doing that 4 years in a row now.
I think that is somebody watching this should take away from this, because we always say, when's the best time to buy? When's the best time to sell? All the new guys are like, you want to sell right as the season's starting and in the playoffs for football and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, to me, this kind of means, late November, early December is a really soft point, and
Hmm.
then that jump right at the end of the year is probably some people maybe got money as a gift, could
Hmm.
be an end of year work bonus,
Hmm.
it could be, so I think that is something that people should take note of. And in years that I've not gone to the national, I've done a fair amount of buying in July because
Yep.
I've noticed things are down. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway for people, and it'll be interesting to see if that continues. But I mean, 4 years in a row,
Yeah.
that is pretty consistent.
Yeah. Yep. Now, again, the actual, the pace of the dip, it's not exact, but the general trend is, again, for those last, say 4 months or so, generally speaking, the index has gone down for 4 years. So yeah, definitely potentially a buying opportunity during those months if you can have money. And again, we talked about the holidays and things like that. That may be some good buying opportunities. And again, the whole adage of, hey, you want to, buy before the playoffs and all that stuff, that's more modern. I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
players that have long since stopped playing baseball.
yeah.
And so that's interesting that there's still that type of trend going for vintage cards. So let's keep things moving here because we have a lot of data to go over. And the next one is the Golden Age Index. So this is an expansion of cards from 1940 all the way to 1959. And I chose, and you can see within the index, the players within the index. I chose to go with some of the more popular players and those cards, a lot of player runs for certain players. I included those cards. And again, for the last 6 months, that index actually went from 2590 to 2835. So on average, the average price for a card in the Golden Age Index over the last 6 months was up $245, and that was pretty much the same for the whole year. So to me, that says the first 6 months pretty much flat, and the last 6 months made up sort of like the whole year gain there of about $250 on average higher price for the cards in the Golden Age Index.
Yeah, I mean it's not surprising because when you think of vintage baseball, you think of those guys that played during that time. And so, people are buying, the Hank Aaron's and the Ernie Bankses and the Mickey Mantles and the Willie Mays and the Roberto Clementes. And the fact that the average price went up kind of makes me think, and again, I don't have that exact data in front of me, but it makes me think that maybe there was a push toward some consolidation in rookie card type stuff because the expensive cards are the ones that are going to pull it up the
Hmm.
hardest.
Yep.
And so if people are, selling their cards from the 60s and going, I'm finally going to get that Hank Aaron rookie card, which is an expensive card. And in a
Hmm.
five, a Hank Aaron rookie card in a five is an expensive card. That's going to do the most to expand it upwards. So, um, I mean, it's hard to know exactly. It's definitely interesting, but but that would be my guess, is maybe a little bit of consolidation towards some bigger cards, which are making that number jump. But again,
Yep.
those are the guys. Those are the guys that people are, generally speaking, filling their collections with.
Yep.
It's not
Yep.
Burt Blyleven,
Yeah.
it's not, you know, it's not guys like that, it's not Joe Morgan, unfortunately. It's those
Yep.
guys are great players, but people are going for the expensive cards right now. It seems like more than ever.
Yep. And there are some biggish cards. So we're talking about some of the 40s play ball DiMaggios are in there, the Ted Williams. And of course we're getting into the Aarons and the Mantles and Mazes rookies and second year cards and all that stuff. There's 49 Leaf cards are in this Golden Age index. So you got the Jackie, the Babe Ruth, some of the bigger cards there, the Satchel Paige. So those are some of the ones, like you said, if people are consolidating and say, hey, I want to finally buy this big card, there may be added demand for that card, which increased demand given a flat supply generally means increased prices. And when I get to my analysis, there are about 5 cards that I noticed that had sort of a large impact on, I think, this increase here over the last 6 months. But here is the chart. So the 6-year chart here for the Golden Age index. And anything strike you with this 6-year time horizon?
Well, again, to me, you almost have to look for 2022 to now to know
Mhm.
what our current environment is. Um, it's a little bit interesting that from 2022 to 2023, things were actually still creeping up a little bit,
Mhm.
and then there was that kind of dump, and then it's been pretty much flat for the last 2 years, mostly. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of this is, we're just throwing darts as to why,
Mhm.
but the drop at the end of 2022 sticks out to me,
Yep.
and then there was another drop, last quarter of 2023, but there wasn't that at the end of 2024. So why would that
Yeah.
be?
Yeah, there's actually that bump up there. Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I saw, and again, I think we're very similar in as how we're looking at this data. For me, I'm looking at pretty much over the last 2 years, the index has been like going within about a 250 point or $250 spread if you want to look at it. So
Hmm.
the lowest I think during the last 2 years or so was $2,590 for again the average price to a high of 2840. So again, within that you get 100 cards, some of them moving up, down, or whatever, but it's fairly stagnant within a range of $250.
Yeah,
Um,
to me, that kind of shows a stable market, and it
yep.
shows a market that the highly volatile ones, where it's going way up and way down, and when housing, a few years ago went way up and then way down, and like that's an unhealthy market where things are kind of bad. But it doesn't really surprise me that a golden age market would be very, very tight like that,
Mhm.
because it's like buying gold, instead of buying crypto.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that is interesting how tight it is in there the last 2 years
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
it and to me, it sort of solidifies the older thought, the pre-COVID thought of vintage is and equate it to stocks. It's the granny stocks, so to speak. They're ones that over time just slowly increase in value, nothing dramatic, not like tech stocks where there may be a run and then a fall, then based on you know big spikes when earnings come out or whatever, and they're just the slow and steady over time, slightly go up in price. And I looked into the data more specifically, and for the last 6 months here, and there were 5 cards that had a from June of 2024 to the end of 2024, the 49 leaf Satchel Paige. Again, that's a short print in the set, a very desirable card, but a very expensive card. And in a PSA 4, it's up $25,000
Hmm.
from the last priced sale in June to the end of the year in December. And so that impacts the index by 250 points. If
Yeah.
you take it, divided by 10, with
Yeah.
the average and
Yeah.
stuff. Then you have the 49 leaf Jackie Robinson. That was actually down $1,000 in
Interesting.
price for the last 6 months. Then the 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle rookie card down 6,000. The 51 Bowman Willie Mays down 3,600, and the 52 Tops Mickey Mantle up 15,200.
Hmm.
Now, the other thing that you have to factor in here, which this index it just doesn't factor in. We talk about it all the time. You talk about it on your channel. When it comes to vintage cards, it's eye appeal.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have, let's say that 49 Leaf Satchel page in a 4. It may have been, off center. The registry may have been off in that sale in June, and the one that sold in December may have been just a great looking copy. And that one sold for $25,000 more than the previous PSA 4. So it could be, some of it could be market driven, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it could be eye appeal
Yeah.
between one sale and another. Again, it's the same number grade, but people are going to pay more for cards with nicer eye appeal. And so this index, I didn't go into and look at a picture of each card that was sold and sort of discount it or give it a higher multiplier because of the eye appeal. One,
Yeah.
my eye appeal differs from other people's eye
Sure.
appeal.
Sure.
So that has to be considered in all of these indexes. Maybe not so much when we get to the 70s, because PSA 7s, for the most part, yeah, you may get some centering issues
Yeah.
between one copy and another, but there's less of a difference in eye appeal. But when you're talking about golden age and even into the 60s, for a particular number grade, you could get a varying change in eye appeal from one card to the next. So that is
Yeah.
one shortcoming uh, to this analysis here.
And I'll say two things to that. Number one, a lot of people discount data because of that, but you also have to think, in an index that has a whole bunch of cards, there are going to be some that have really good high eye appeal and some have really bad eye appeal. So the average
Which,
of the averages, now the most expensive card, like the 52 Mantle, if the last one was high eye appeal or low eye appeal, it weighs it down up and down more. But
mhm,
it, an average of averages tends to work some of that out. The
yeah,
other thing that I think when you look at this that's a little bit concerning, and at least I think we need to mention, is inflation's been pretty high over the last 3, 4 years. And
mhm,
if you look at this and you say, okay, let's go back 4 years,
yeah,
the market's a little down. It's pretty flat. It's a little down, but compared to inflation, it should be up,
yeah,
and it's not up. It's a little down. So if it was inflation adjusted dollars along that time, it
mhm,
would be a lot more of a negative thing. So, cards and any sort of commodities or assets, gold and silver and oil and all that stuff is sort of a hedge against inflation. So when it's kind of going down a little bit, as inflation has been spiking a little bit, that paints a little bit of a different picture. So I just feel like we should at least mention that, because otherwise some people might be throwing things at the screen.
yeah. No, that's a great point to make, and something that I wasn't thinking of. Yeah, because the value of your dollar moving forward as inflation it gets eroded.
Hmm.
And again, you would think that it would take more dollars to buy that similar card when inflation's going up, just like you
Right.
have to spend more for eggs and bread and cereal and all that stuff. But here it's holding steady, which, like as you said, inflation adjusted may actually mean comparing inflation
Real,
dollars.
real
Real,
buying
yes.
possibilities to what you're getting for it. If it looks flat, it's really like a 10% drop over the last couple of years,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
real dollar ability to do something for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Good. Good. All right. Well, let's get to the 1960s index. Now, talk about flat for the last 6 months. We're talking about, on average, a $4 change in the price of the card over the last 6 months, and over the last 12 months, maybe a 5% drop. Which, again, when you're talking about an average card price of around $315, $320, you're talking maybe what, $8 or $9 or something like that, which in the grand scheme of things is not that much.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah. I
let's,
mean,
yeah.
I go ahead. Yeah. Just
I
keep
was just
moving.
I was just going to get to the chart while
Okay.
you're talking there. Yep.
Yeah. To me, where I've noticed the most is in like the late 60s right now. Like, you know, alkaline cards from the middle 60s, or some of these really good play, even guys like Clemente. And when I do my cards under $50 each month,
Yeah.
like some of the cards, and you're like, you can get a 4 of that guy this year. Like, that seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
I,
Yep.
I feel like the 60s, I'm not surprised to see that the 60s haven't done as well. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't 100% know why that is. Again, I feel like what's happening, and again, we're just making this up. We're just guessing as
Yep.
why this is all happening. But
Yep.
I feel like a lot of us who are into cards are watching a lot of YouTube right now, and we see these people showing these really big, awesome cards, and we want to be a part of that party. And
Hmm.
people on budgets like mine,
Yeah.
like, we're not a
Yep.
part of that party.
I know.
But just like when I watch TV and I see these mega mansions, I cannot sit there and go, well, I guess I got to sell all my assets and my kidney to go buy this mega mansion because that looks better than what I have.
Yeah.
My guess is a lot of people, my guess is a lot of people have been dumping guys like Kaline, like McCovey,
Hmm.
like some of these great players, and they've been going towards the older, shinier object.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and to me, that's a discouraging thing for the hobby, not because it's a bad thing to do,
Hmm.
but it's as soon as we stop getting joy from those cards too, then I think we're starting to lose sight about what is our reason for being in the hobby. If
Yeah.
you're only happy when you have the Aaron rookie and you're not happy with the Aaron third year card, like that's kind of discouraging because that's not what it used to be about for most of us.
Hmm.
And so I
Yep.
worry about that. But I understand why people are doing it. Like, I've got dream cards too, and
Yeah.
I've sold a fair amount of things over the last couple of months, and I'm bringing a bigger amount of, I'm bringing twice as much money to Strongsville this year as I did last year,
Good.
because I want the big item too. So I'm not trying to act like I'm innocent and everybody else is doing something wrong. It's just kind of the nature of the whole thing is we want to be part of it. And one of the things that I think is suffering as a result are a lot of these middle to end of career cards
Hmm.
of guys like Mays and Clemente and Aaron. Those things are super cheap right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, whether it's selling some cards just to get that one big card, or just doing a consolidation of your collection. Hey, I've been collecting for so long. I have like 500 cards in my bit. I want to get it down to 100. So you start selling off, and most likely they're the ones maybe from the 60s and 70s
Hmm.
that you don't have, as aren't the rookie cards or the big cards from that player. And you say, well, I'll sell those other ones. Well, what happens is it increases the supply of copies sold. So there's more of them out there, and you can pick and choose, and you can be a little bit better in negotiations or whatever, to get a lower price. And yeah, it negatively does impact the cards from the 60s, and we'll see in the 70s as well. And in fact, my analysis right there is over of the last 2.5 years, down 23%. Now,
Yeah.
again, the dollar amounts are like $410 down to 315, but that's about $100 on average drop
Yeah.
in the price of a card from the 60s. And there are some great cards and
Oh
great
yeah.
players from the 60s. And I agree. There's and I'm guilty of it as well. I'm like, man, should I sell some cards and go get a Ty Cobb Redback or a 49 leaf Babe Ruth, or one of those cards. It's almost like there's a an index of 100, not grail cards, but cards that a lot of these collectors say, man, I'd love to have that card in my collection. And I hope we're not getting to your point. I hope we're not getting to the point where longtime vintage collectors, that's it, they only want those 100 cards because those are the big cards that everyone else has, and that they forget about the other great cards from the vintage era.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if this continues. By nature, I'm kind of a contrarian. When COVID's hitting and everyone's selling their stocks, I'm pulling money out of savings and buying stocks. When everyone's selling their house, I'm going out buying a house. I mean,
Hmm.
that's kind of how I'm wired, is to say, well, this is my opportunity.
Hmm.
It does feel like this is an opportunity to buy like rookies from the 60s. I mean, like a Joe Morgan rookie is so cheap right now. A
Yeah.
Steve Carlton, a Jim Palmer, a Juan Marichal, a Lou Brock, a Gaylord Perry. Those cards are so cheap right now that it feels like, isn't this my chance? But
Yep.
then there's always that thought of, in the back of our minds is, well, it seems like nobody cares about those cards anymore.
Right.
And so if they don't care about those cards now and they're not going to start again, then maybe they're cheap. Maybe they're overvalued right now.
Maybe there's still room for them to go down in price. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So nobody knows. And that's why ultimately, if you do the whole collect what you like thing, if you like Lou Brock, now's a great time to buy some of his early cards.
Yep.
And Juan Marichal, oh my gosh, his rookie card is a beautiful card.
Yep.
And it's so cheap right now.
Yeah.
So cheap. Uh, I've never seen Joe Morgan's rookie card this cheap ever,
Yeah.
and so, if that's stuff that you like, instead of saving up for that grail, you could use the same money that you would be buying on a 55 Clemente, as you could buy like every rookie card from the 60s other than probably Seaver and Nolan Ryan and
Yeah.
Pete Rose. You could
Yep.
buy every other rookie card, or you could have the Clemente for the
Yeah.
same amount right now, like literally.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, it goes to what your goal is for your collection. My
Yeah.
goal is to have a large collection, so quantity over quality.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking at this data and I'm saying, wow, maybe now's the time for me to, because I'm missing like the 60 McCovey rookie. Hey, now may be the
Dude,
time for me to
that
start
card
looking
is
around for
that card is
McCovey
so
rookies.
cheap right now. The
Yeah.
McCovey rookie is so cheap right now.
Yep. And so that may be, one that I then, look to maybe pick up at the possibly Strongsville, the National.
Yeah.
After I, maybe hopefully hit my big card for the National. But, I'm starting to think, hey, maybe these cards that I've always wanted in my collection now may be the time, because I started. You probably know my history. I started my vintage collection pretty much in early 2021.
Hmm.
And the worst possible time to get into vintage. But now I'm thinking, okay, now it's back down to reasonable levels, and maybe I can take now is maybe the time for me to pick up some of these cards. So
The other thing I will throw out there, and I know we're deep down the rabbit hole at this point, but if you go to a show like Strongsville, and say you're thinking, yeah, I've been thinking about, going for the, I don't know, 57 Frank Robinson or Brooks Robinson, which is a more expensive one.
mhm,
Maybe I will just knock off like 5 or 6 of the rookies from the 60s. If you buy those cards on eBay, by the time you pay your tax, by the time you pay the shipping is such a bigger
Yep.
percentage of those cards. When you
Yeah.
pay $8 to have it shipped and handled on a $50 card versus on $1,000 card. So
Hmm.
I am a person who I buy a lot of my cheap cards at shows. Like when I buy my 84 Tops Don Mattingly and I buy my 83 Daryl Strawberry and stuff, I'm doing that at shows because otherwise I'm paying $5 to ship a $15 card. And
Yeah.
that's 33% of the cost. So if you're going to a big show, sometimes we all want to get the big card at the show. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
actually advantageous to get the cheap card.
Yeah. And if you find the right dealer and can find a couple of cards, you can maybe do, a combo deal. And pretty much, on eBay, you either have an auction, buy it now, and that buy it now may not always have a best offer. At a
Yeah.
card show, you can try and negotiate on a single card or a group of cards and get a deal, whereas you may not be able to negotiate a deal through eBay depending on how that card's listed. Plus, like you said, you're paying shipping and tax. And yeah, like you said, on those smaller price cards, that's a higher impact.
Hmm.
Yeah, good point. Good point. All right, let's get to the 70s here. And as you can see, actually, the average price was up $11 over the last 6 months, up maybe around $5 or so over the last 12 months. So we're not talking about big dollar cards here in the 70s, and it shows it in the graph. I mean, that yeah, there was I don't even know if you want to call it a COVID bubble because it's over, when COVID hit, it just took a slow meandering up. It was higher, and now it's just like stalled. It's my take is it's almost like when the new norm from COVID started with the golden age. Everyone wanted those bigger cars. They had these big stimulus checks. They had all this extra money. They weren't going out to eat, and they put it toward the more popular vintage cars, the 50s. Then it filtered down some of the 60s, and then finally it was just like the end of that big wave on a shore. You get the big wave and then a smaller one and a smaller one. That it finally reached the 70s, but not very impactfully. And then since then, it's just sort of sputtered out. That's how I'm looking at this.
Yeah, hard to disagree with that. And when you look at the last 2 years, it's pretty much flat. It's pretty much flat the last 2 years,
Yep.
which is interesting when, the other stuff has been trending slightly down. Um, I don't
But
know.
again,
Yeah.
inflation,
Yeah.
when you
So it's
factor that
down.
in,
So it is
especially.
down when you factor that in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I looked at that general. I mean, last 4 years. I mean, yeah, within the last 4 years, you have a couple little dips and rises. But I mean, if you look at that trend line, now maybe right not at the beginning of 2021, but a couple months in, we're almost right at that same level at December of 2024. I mean, it's like it just
Yeah.
last 4 years, cards from the 70s. I mean, you can still pick up for decent prices. It's like the sort of like the stepchild or the fifth wheel, the
Yeah.
70s cards. It seems it shouldn't. I mean, I love cards from the 70s, but it's at the end of that vintage era, and
Yeah.
I think there's just generally less interest in those cards from that decade than other decades.
Well, I think there's also more supply.
Yep.
And so, there's that. And I think when people got these big stimulus checks, they weren't like, "Oh, great. Now I can go out and finally get the 75 Robin Yount."
Right.
And I know Dylan loves that card and I love
Yeah.
that card.
Yep.
But that's not where people's minds went.
Hmm.
They didn't think about, the Dave Winfield rookie or the Andre Dawson rookie. They thought
Yep.
about, "Oh, this maybe I should go out and buy, a Kofax."
Yep.
So,
Yep. So that's not too surprising. So let's get into as we have maybe about the 20 minutes or so here, get into the three player indexes: Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron. And I think there's going to be some interesting um, charts here for those as well. So for the Mickey Mantle Index, I took a look at the cards that were in the golden age from the 50s and the card from the 60s. So, of course, there's cards from 51 to 69. And there are 30 cards from those two indexes that I pulled to create the Mickey Mantle Index. And here, over the last 6 months, on average, up $279. Now, I did mention that huge difference and increase in the sale of that 52 Topps Mantle. So now you only have 30 cards. So a big rise in one card is going to have more an effect than if you were dealing with 100 cards. So again, keep that in mind there. But looking back from the last 12 months, again, maybe you're up around $275 or something like that. So here's the chart, and again, it's probably very heavily reliant on his 51 Bowman and 52 Topps. Once you get past those cards, yeah, you still have some expensive ones, but they're not big jumps in prices up or down. And so, again, there is some limitation to this Mickey Mantle Index, but let them know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Mickey Mantle was really good, and Mickey Mantle is not the best player of all time, but Mickey Mantle is the king of this hobby. And so, not that I would ever give anybody investment advice, because that's
Yeah.
not what I'm in this for,
Yep.
but it is a safer place to have your money. If you're going to be putting money into cards, you know, Paul Skeens could throw out his elbow tomorrow. Mickey Mantle is always going to be Mickey Mantle.
Yep.
And so to see a mostly upward trend, again, we have to really look in this case, 2022 to now, pretty flat,
Mm-hmm.
but pretty flat in uh is I mean, uh, it's Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
There's always going to be that demand. There's always
Yeah.
going to be demand for Babe Ruth. There's always going to be
Mm-hmm.
demand for Mickey Mantle. And so I'm not surprised that it's on the stronger end of the three players we're going to look at.
Yep. Yep. Nope. Nope. Good points there. Again, when I was looking over the last 2 years, yeah, with the whole inflation thing aside, it's almost like a what's the word? I'm gonna forget it's like a blue chip stock. Like
Yeah.
it's like if you want
It's
to
Apple. It's fine Apple.
invest, I don't want to say I don't like to use the word invest either, but
Yeah. Yeah.
if you want to put money into a card that is not going to have massive fluctuations, that the bottom's not going to drop out of Mickey Mantle cards. All right. If there are other cards that maybe lose favor in the hobby, just Mickey Mantle's sort of there to stay. And
And the big cards which pull this chart up and down the most, there's the 52 Mantle and the 51 Mantle are like two of the cards. Like there will always be strong demand for those two cards.
yep.
Like there will be a lot of cards that are worthless before those cards, get cut in half in value, because
Yep. I mean,
they're the
people
50.
get
Yeah,
rid of half their collections to try to finally own one day a 52 Topps Mickey Mantle. I mean, it's
100%.
yeah. Yep. So, all right. Well, Willie Mays. Okay. Here, it's almost the opposite, and there's one thing here over the last 6 months that I found very interesting. So we had a dip, and again, there's the 51 Bowman Willie Mays rookie card I had mentioned in the Golden Age Index. In the last 6 months, that price was down $3,600. Again, could have been because of an eye appeal. I've seen a lot of Willie Mays cards that are PSA 4 that are really off center, maybe have some registration issues. So factor that in. And over the last 12 months, probably down $400. And there are 28 cards in this index from the golden age, the 60s, and of course he has a few cards into the 70s. But uh, what do you see from that data there?
Now remind me, he died in the summer of 23, right?
Yes, he died. No, 24.
It was the summer of 24.
Yeah.
Um, Let me look at the exact date because I think that could be an interesting an interesting thing
I
to
want to say it was like
consider.
June 27th,
Oh,
24?
very good. June 28th of 24.
28th.
So yeah, I
Okay.
knew it was in the summer. I guess I'm at that old where years
Yeah.
just fly by now.
Yep.
But so it's almost where that dotted line is.
Yep. That, in
Um,
fact, that's right there.
okay,
That's
yeah.
what I found very, very interesting. And in fact,
Um,
the last like 16 months,
so
very
so
interesting
here's
for
my
Willie Mays.
take on that. I believe that that is evidence of the supply side of economics. There were a lot of people who I think were loading up on Willie Mays cards, thinking that his cards would go up when he died. And
Hmm.
then they all flooded the market when he did. And
Yep.
so there was a temporary increase in demand. I mean,
Hmm.
but there was also a huge increase in supply. I've told this story, I think, once on my channel, but I collected when I was in the COVID time. I was buying and selling a lot of soccer cards, like English Premier League, La
Hmm.
Liga, and there came a point where the prices were climbing, 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 waiting for the last World Cup. And the World Cup was at the end of the year. It was like December or something.
Hmm.
And everyone, all of a sudden, the World Cup started, and everyone thought that these cards were just going to shoot up because of all the attention. But
Yep.
everyone absolutely flooded the market at the same time
Yep.
with soccer cards, so much so that the bottom fell out of the cards.
Hmm.
And when everyone was expecting them to go up, they actually plummeted, and a lot of them still haven't recovered. Now, some of the
Yep.
guys like Messi and Ronaldo
Yeah.
and their rookie cards have.
Yep.
So the supply is a really, really important factor with pricing of cards. And I think, to me, even though there was an increase in demand,
Yep.
the increase in supply was so great
Yep.
that it still couldn't keep up with it.
Yep. And I think that the real time for that increase in price was in early to mid 2023. You see that going up there. Now again,
Yeah.
his 51 Bowman rookie card and 52 tops could play a big part in this. But I think maybe 22 into 23, people were saying, "Hey, Willie Mays is in his 90s.
Yeah.
Um, I better take advantage now," thinking that when he passes away, his cards are going to be even higher. I need to buy Willie Mays cards now
Yeah.
before prices go up. So you saw something maybe in 2023 where there was a realization of, hey, one of the greatest players of all time, I need to get some Willie Mays cards in my collection. And then, like you said, when he finally did pass away, and everyone was like, all right, now I can cash in. And the supply just outpaced there was still demand there, but it outpaced supply. And classic economics, the price actually went down when a lot of people thought it would probably go up. So that's why I highlighted those last 6 months. I found it very interesting that his prices went down and not up, which was contrary to probably what a lot of people were anticipating.
I want to give one more quick example. So, one of the sets I like a lot, and I have quite a few cards from, is the 52 Look-In C set that Topps
Mhm.
made, which is, inventors and scientists, and there's a Babe Ruth card in that set. And there was one remaining living person from the 52 Look-In C set, and it was Queen Elizabeth. And it got to the point where, other than Babe Ruth, that was the second biggest card. The
Wow.
Lincoln was kind of expensive, but and what I believe is people were buying it, waiting for her to die for the same reason, because literally everyone else was dead in the set.
Yep.
And so the price got up to the point where it was literally the second most expensive card in the set. And I follow that. It's like one of my saved searches on eBay. So I follow when cards are posted for it. And the moment it was announced that she died,
Yep.
they were just bang, 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 listing Queen Elizabeth's like crazy
Yeah.
on that, trying to cash out. And again, the supply got flooded, and all, let's be honest, there aren't a ton of people looking for 1952 look and see Queen Elizabeth cards.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so the 4 people who wanted one got
Yep.
it. And
Yep.
then there were just a flooded market, and the prices never really recovered from that. It's now just a regular card in the set. I mean, it's a little bit bigger than,
Hmm.
Michelangelo or something, but it's a great example of exactly this.
Yep. 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 So yeah, don't necessarily think that you can time the market, because chances are other collectors are thinking the same thing, and you might end up shooting yourself in the foot by trying to time when whether sell or buy or whatever. And it's just it. I found that very interesting. All right, on.
Autographs are
Yeah.
different. Autographs are different because then the
Yes.
supply ends. But this
Yes.
is just for cards. So if you're out there
Yep.
listening to this, thinking about along these lines, autographs are a different story. So Sandy Koufax's autograph is going to be as sought after, if not more, when he passes.
Yes. Yep. Very, very good point. There you have the supply stops. And then as people want, get more and more, I already, yep, absolutely. All right. On to Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron's sort of in that middle ground between Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays. Pretty much, again, not a whole lot of movement. And we'll see it here in the chart. Again, we have 27 cards that make up this index. And I have a thought here as well, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are, and it may not differ from when you looked at this data back in July, but
I would say my biggest takeaway from this one is if you went back a couple of slides to Mantle and a couple of slides to Mays, this is a much tighter up and down movement than those
mhm,
were,
yep,
which tells me probably that there were some really high and really low eye appeals of their rookie cards because their rookie card is exponentially more than their other cards.
yep,
Hank Aaron's rookie card is very expensive.
yep,
It's not quite as expensive as those two that were probably dragging it up and down by those cards. So it might partly have to do with the value of the rookie card, but I do find it interesting that there aren't any huge spikes up or down with Hank Aaron. That's the biggest thing that pops out to me. It is
yep,
down, yeah, but it's
yep.
kind of flatly down.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I look at it as like a softening. Now, again, back to your point of inflation, it may be a little bit more pronounced than that. But for me, Hank Aaron is what one of those players that is considered, again, one of the all-time greats, is popular in the hobby, but I don't think as popular, definitely as, again, hobby popularity as Mickey Mantle, and maybe not even as much as Willie Mays. And for Hank Aaron, um, to some extent, it's the same with Willie Mays, because he has cards, you know, in through the 1960s and into the 1970s. But Hank Aaron, where Willie Mays stopped at 73, Hank Aaron went through 76. So, his 76 card isn't that much. So it helps bring that average down. And his rookie card compared to the Mantle and Mays, like you said, have greater swings, but are worth more. Then once you get past the Hank Aaron rookie card, even his second year card
Yeah,
is not that expensive, and third
yeah.
year. And so you start off, once you get past his rookie card, they're not that expensive, and so you're going to have smaller movements. So it is not surprising that I saw that there's a fairly maybe a slight erosion or softening, but not big movements at all with his prices.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also interesting because I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking about the cards themselves. And like, no disrespect to Willie Mays, because I love Willie Mays, but some of his cards aren't the best looking cards.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey, Mickey Mantle, most of his cards are.
yep,
And and Hank Aaron, he's got a lot of really good looking cards too. Um,
hmm
54, 55, 56, 57, 58. I love the
yeah,
58. I like the
yeah,
59. I like the 60. I
yeah,
mean, he's got pretty good looking cards. so I don't know. Like, I mean, I just had to share that, but I'm just going through them, and then at the end, these guys look pretty old, but they're pretty good looking cards. So
Yeah, I'm working on a Hank Aaron run, and maybe my hopefully my big purchase at the National is his rookie card. And I'm only missing 3 others then. I'm gonna look to see if I can find any of them at Strongsville or at the National. But yeah, I mean, I've between those 3 players, I picked Hank Aaron, 1, because overall it's more affordable than
yeah,
trying to complete a Willie Mays run and heaven forbid a Mickey Mantle run. But I just love the Hank Aaron cards, just like
yeah,
throughout his playing these
yeah,
it's rare that I say, oh yeah, I don't really quite like that Hank Aaron card. I like so many of them,
yeah.
and they're relatively inexpensive. I know
They
they're more
are.
expensive than say now K-Line or some of the others that you mentioned, but um, it's not going to break the bank, and you can get some really nice cards.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised that there aren't any big swings. All right, to finish things off, what I thought I as I was entering data, and when I'm entering data, I mark just again for clarification. I don't enter into these index. I don't enter the price for every single sale in VCP's database. So if there are 6 sales in the month of October, I use the last sale for that month. Okay. Um, it's just hey, that's the last sale of the month. I had to pick some point to do, or else I would have just driven myself crazy with all the data entry. Um, and if 2 cards or more sold on that same date, I took the average. And so I in my spreadsheet I bold those numbers again just for my knowledge and stuff. But I also notice when a card hits a new high. Now, I don't know if it could technically be a new record high, but it's a new high since I started entering data from the beginning of 2019. And over the last 6 months, there were a good number of cards that hit new highs, and some of them may not be surprising, but a few of them I was a little surprised to see that they hit new record highs. And I didn't go into I didn't look to see where those cards were sold, because VCP pulls from eBay, pulls from auction houses and various sources. Okay. But I think, and I don't want to put too much into this, but if I recall, I think a couple of them were sold through the Fanatics, either direct or their auction or something.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a little bit more of those Fanatics listings pop up in VCP, and I think maybe some of these, whether it's good, bad, whatever, it's just something I happen to observe. I think some of these high prices were through the Fanatics, like I said, either a buy it now or auction through their website. So that may be interesting of note. Maybe I'll, moving forward, try to keep an eye on that. But are any of those cards on that list maybe surprising to you or not surprising that they hit new highs over the last 6 months?
Yeah. There are a couple that I find surprising. The I'm not surprised by Dobie or Page.
Yep.
I'm not surprised really even by Oliva or Pete Rose. That one makes
Hmm.
sense. Dave Parker makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, I think the ones that maybe stick out to me, I don't maybe Thurman Munson. People thought
Yep.
he was had a chance as the Veterans Committee, but
Yep.
then
That could
didn't.
be.
So there was some attention. I mean, the 58 tops Ted Williams seems
Yes.
odd to
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
That seems like a little bit to me of a lot of those are rookie cards
Hmm.
or extremely good pictures of the guys, like the 64 Pete
Yeah.
Rose, but he just passed. But
Yep.
a really good picture, 61 Koufax, really good picture.
Yep.
A lot of those are really good pictures. And then that Ted Williams, which I love Ted
Love.
Williams,
Yes.
but
Absolutely.
that is
But
not a good picture of Ted Williams. That's Ted
yeah.
Williams' worst card.
Yeah.
And
Well, but it's his last playing days card.
it is his last,
A
and there are a
and
couple on there that are, like,
yep,
last or close to last, like
the 76 Hank Aaron. Now that's not his major
yeah,
one, that's his, record
yeah,
breaker.
yeah.
Um, but the 79 Reggie Jackson, I mean, again, we're only talking 25 bucks. So I think the new record high, the previous one may have been like 22 bucks. I'm gonna guess so we're not talking about like a major high sale here. But yeah, some of them it just like
The
nothing
biggest
against the
the bit
61 Kofax, but it's like mid mid career. I mean, it's a nice looking card, but to me, there's nothing other than the wood grain. And a lot of these very well could be extremely, maybe they're new, maybe they were newer slabs. Okay, maybe we don't have time to go into this whole thing, but could be newer slabs that have tremendous eye appeal for the grade, and maybe that sold for a premium, and you get more than one bidder on something. If it was an auction, I don't know how many of these were auction or buy it nows. That could
I
factor into some of these sales, but to have record high sales,
another
yeah,
thing that jumps a little bit is look at how many of them were in November, meaning
yep,
October.
hmm,
So in
yeah,
October,
yep,
you had 6, so about a third of those, I think I counted 16 or 17, so 6 out of, like, 17. So a little over a third of those come from the month of October,
hmm,
which I know there's excitement around playoff baseball. I know that it's possible people are watching, the World Series and sitting around going, "Oh," and they hear a story about somebody or something.
yep.
But it is a little interesting, that that happened. So
Yeah.
many happened that month. That's a little bit of an outlier too.
Now, I don't know because again, I should have maybe looked into more of the data. So I don't know how many of these sales were from eBay. I don't know how many for auction houses. I don't. I'm not at that point in my collecting career where I'm looking at buying stuff from some of the auction houses. I don't know if maybe the October November timeframe falls into some of the fall or winter um, bigger auctions that you'll find some really nice copies of
Mm,
some 50s and 60s cards, really nice eye appeal, and maybe they did very well in through those auction houses. So I don't know the source of those sales, so that I I don't know. Maybe in the comments, the people who follow some of the auction houses, maybe that toward the end of the year is where there's maybe more of those auctions that the auction companies do. I don't know.
yeah. Super interesting though.
Yeah. Yeah, I always find that just looking at this data again, you can get so far into the weeds and come up with um, thoughts that may or may not actually be true on why these things are acting like they are. But I just find stuff like this very very interesting. So, what are your sort of final thoughts? We're right around this hour here. I wanted to keep it in. What are some of your just thoughts and takeaways from not only the newest 6 months of data, but now 6 years worth of data?
Yeah, I I say whenever I'm looking at this stuff, you hear a lot of doom and gloom. I mean, there are a lot of channels that talk about how the market is on fire, and then the next day the market is a disaster, and it's hard to take anything with a grain of salt. But a lot of that's anecdotal. So the thing I like about data is data. And so when you look at numbers and what things are selling for, it paints a real picture.
Hmm.
And while there's a slightly downward trend for the most part, it's very slight. And again, the inflation thing, maybe it's more steep than it looks, maybe, but I just feel like a lot of people have been talking about how, oh, nobody wants those vintage cards anymore. Those guys they don't play anymore. Nobody cares about those guys anymore.
Yep. Vintage is
And if
dead
that
and
was,
all that.
yeah,
That's
if
yeah.
vintage was dead, it feels like it would be a lot more bleak. Like that, you just showed a list of like almost 20 cards that hit like all time highs.
Yeah.
like in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of cards when you're looking at really like 100. Your vintage 100,
Hmm.
17 hit all time highs. Like that doesn't look bleak to me.
Yeah.
I don't, I will never tell anybody that they should invest in cards.
Yeah.
Again, I
Yeah.
think that people that say that, like, that's not what you should be doing this for.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
other thing I would say, I think a takeaway is it does really feel to me like while we didn't have actual hard numbers to prove this, it feels like the lesser expensive cards of some of the all-time greats um are affordable, and the thing that makes me say that is some of the jumps in some of the biggest cards
Hmm.
upward that
Yeah.
are not really making the whole curve go upward tells me that those other smaller cards are kind of affordable, and it
Yep.
might be a good opportunity to go for those, but only if that's what you like collecting. If you
Yep.
don't like those cards, don't go buy them because you think this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
You only go, I've been thinking about doing a Willie McCovey run. I think right now is a good time to do a Willie McCovey run because all those
Yeah.
cards in the 60s are cheap. I think it's a
Yeah.
really good time. That doesn't mean that it's going to be worth more, but it
Hmm.
means it's a better time to be buying them now than at any other point in the last 10 years.
Yep.
So, I just think it's interesting. Again, a lot of us have opinions, myself certainly full of opinions. Uh, but data is data, and data is not an opinion. Data are a bunch of facts stacked together. So I find
Yeah.
that interesting.
Yeah. For me, my takeaway is yeah, the non big cards, the main drivers of some of these indexes, the ups and downs, are it's fairly steady. The vintage section of the hobby, I think, it's strong. It's not going gangbusters. Okay, we're not
Right.
seeing just everything going up. Um, are there some bargains out there? Yes. Is stuff holding relative value over a couple year period? Yes, which I think is healthy.
Yeah.
But to your point of, hey, now maybe if you're looking to do a Willie McCovey run, now may be a good time to do it. One of the things that I see is for some of these bigger cards. So getting to those who say, I want to consolidate, I want to buy some of these bigger cards and sell some of my cards to be able to afford one of these big cards at Strongsville or the National. Um, to me, one, eye appeal greatly dictates. Some of this stuff has to be due to eye appeal. I've done other videos where I look at the monthly sales on eBay, and just the eye appeal from one card to the next can dramatically change the sales price for the same number grade. But for those cards, I would say sort of like be patient, because while you may see one card jump up in price, it may be just because one had extraordinary eye appeal. Be patient, because there may be another one where you can get a lot cheaper. So the swings for some of these bigger cards doesn't mean that, okay, I need to take advantage of buying it now because in a year or two it's even going to be more out of my price range. Maybe not. We see
Yeah.
some big swings, but big swings up and big swings down. And some of it maybe eye appeal, that you can get a decent looking card if you're patient enough, and you won't be paying that high price for some of the cards in nicer eye appeal.
And
So
and I will throw one last thing onto that because I agree with that, and I think that's something that we all need to keep in mind. But I really, really, really like that eye appeal is affecting prices as much as it does,
mhm,
because when people are paying up for eye appeal, it takes some of the grading companies' power away, because for a long time the grading companies have had all the power and
yep,
they decided what was good, and
hmm,
we just kind of went by with whatever they said.
hmm,
So when you see a Babe Ruth with good eye appeal and a 2 go for more than a 4 or whatever that one auction was a few months ago,
Yep.
you're like, that's good news for us collectors, because it means we're not just going by what a grading company is
We're
saying.
judging the eye appeal of the card and discounting, maybe not completely, but discounting that number grade
Yeah.
and looking at the card and say, I like the eye appeal. I did a video recently and someone commented that they normally collect cards in like, 6 and 7 grade, but they came across, I forget what, I think it was a Hank Aaron card. I forget what year, maybe a 59 tops Hank Aaron in a 3.5. And he said, it looked great, like great centering and stuff. There's probably some technical flaws, and he bought that 3.5 because he says it looked so good to him. He
Yeah.
says, even though my other ones are like 6s and 7s, I bought that 3.5 because I love how it looked, and I didn't
Yeah.
care that it was technically a 2.5. So I
Yeah.
think we are going to start seeing that trend moving forward. So
Yeah.
Graig, thank you so much for joining me on this discussion here, and would love to know from all of you that have gone this far here, what are some of your thoughts? Did you see anything in the data, the charts, that maybe we missed, or maybe you think we got wrong? We'd love to know in the comments what all of you think about this data. And Graig, one last time, thank you so much. I'll have, for those of you who are not familiar with Graig, I can't believe anyone that watches my channel does not know Graig's channel, but I'll have a link to his channel in the description of this video. And that's all we have for you. Hopefully, we'll be back maybe before the National. That'll be a nice another 6-month period. I have to get on my butt and enter all the data, but I may be reaching out to you again, Graig,
Yeah.
sometime in July before the National. And with that, that's all we have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.